Good morning, everyone. It's a very wet day here in Delhi. Today is 23rd of July, and we are going to understand important articles from the Indian Express newspaper. Now, you'll be surprised to see why there are only 4 articles, but you'll be happy when I tell you that first 3 articles are a very detailed article, right? So, we are going to start our today's discussion from the left out article that we are being trying to cover in the last 2 days, but we haven't for many reasons, is the relief on food inflation. I told you yesterday itself that I will start our today's discussion with this article so that at least this does not get left out. Okay. Now, India faced a problem related to food inflation in the past 2 years, but this year, surprisingly, the food inflation is not there. So, we'll try to understand what are the reasons why food inflation isn't there in the country and how is food inflation measured in India. Now, you understand there is a very popular index to measure inflation in India known as Consumer Price Index. But for food inflation, we rely on another index known as Consumer Food Price Index. So, I'll tell you what these two indexes have in common or the differences between these two indexes. And in addition to that, we'll also cover the factors that have promoted or that have led to cooling down in food inflation into India. And this is relevant from GS paper 3 perspective. Okay. In the second article, we are going to understand what is the presidential reference that is in news. It is according to Article 143, the President of India, she has made request to the Supreme Court to give their certain legal opinion on the question that she has asked. So we are going to cover what is a presidential reference, how it can impact India's polity. In addition to that, we'll also try to cover the background of this issue. What actually forced the President of India to pose certain questions to the Supreme Court under the presidential reference. So everything that you should know regarding this topic, we will cover in our today's discussion. Nothing will be left out. No need to worry. Okay. Now, as you can understand, this is a part of polity. Hence, the relevant paper here becomes GS paper 2. In the third article, we are going to cover concerns over Chinese dam that has been built very near to the borders with India, that is near the Arunachal Pradesh state. So we'll try to understand what are the ecological, geographical, social concerns associated with this dam project and what can India do in order to alleviate some of these concerns. Okay. So this is relevant from GS paper 1, particularly from the geography side, but also from GS paper 3 perspective, because basically it impacts the environment of the region, right? So GS paper 3 is the relevant paper here. And in the last article, we are going to cover a joint initiative by NASA and ISRO known as NISAR satellite. So what is NISAR satellite? How it can actually improve the earth sensing capabilities of India? What are the key components that have been supplied by ISRO and NASA respectively? We are going to understand in our today's discussion. And this deals with science and tech. Therefore, the relevant paper here becomes GS paper 3 perspective, right? So these are the articles we are going to start covering, and you know the drill. The notes for these session, they will be made available after the video ends on the Telegram channel known as ATS Live. If you don't know this channel, if you haven't subscribed to it, just open your Telegram app. On the top right hand corner, there's a search bar. Click on it and write ATS Live. You'll find the channel. But if you have problems in locating it, this is the QR code you can scan. Subscribe to it if you still haven't and download the notes. Okay. Now, let us start our today's discussion with this article. First, let us exchange pleasantries. Many of you have joined. Let me see. Well, Rupa, Kharbudon, Bandana, Stuti, Parsana, Amar, Arya, Venus, Anandu, Yashi, Anuj, Prince, AC, Kanchan, Venkat, Santwana, Baga, Yukta, Jonah, Mamta, Venus, Gaurav, Mamim, Sanju. Good morning, all of you. Yes, it's Chandrasekhar Azad's birthday today, 119th birthday. He played a very pivotal role in our Indian national movement. Venus, I didn't read the newspaper today, last day of covered, and the newspaper wale bhaiya didn't show up. Well, I guess this is because of monsoon. If you live in Delhi, the monsoon was quite brutal today in the morning. I barely escaped it. I just reached the metro station and it started pouring. So good luck on my side. I'm still dry. Now, good morning, Dheeraj. Good morning, Saurabh. All of you, good morning. Let me refresh this page. So let's start our today's discussion. Shushmita, good morning. Now, this is the article that was in the newspaper 2 days back, but this is a very detailed article, so we weren't getting the time to cover it. But today I made it sure that I'll cover this first before getting into another articles, right? This article basically is a very detailed article giving facts of production, prices, etc., which may or may not be important from your exams perspective. So if you read this article, I've actually taken out what you require from this exam. I've added something from my side, and I will present it to you, everything that you need for this exam, right? So reading the newspaper blindly sometimes can be quite detrimental to your exams perspective, because newspaper is not just catering to UPSC aspirant. Newspaper is also catering to wider audience. So it will provide every information necessary which may or may not be important from your exams perspective, right? So let us deal with this article. It basically says that India witnessed a record low inflation in India in the month of June 2025. India's retail inflation is measured by consumer price index, and it showed only 2.1% of inflation. And you know the drill. RBI wants to keep the inflation between the figures of 2 to 6% of CPI. So this basically is the very lower zone where the RBI wants the inflation to be, right? And when you consider food inflation, it is showing negative inflation. Negative inflation is also called as deflation. Do you understand the difference between inflation, disinflation, and deflation? If you don't, let me tell you very quickly. Right, suppose in the year 2022, a particular article or a particular commodity was available at the rate of rupees 100, right? So this was the price of that commodity in the year 2022. Now, in 2023, the price of this commodity increased from 100 rupees to 110 rupees, which means the inflation here becomes what? Inflation here becomes 10% of inflation. But suppose in the year 2023, as against increasing, it got decreased to 95 rupees. So here the inflation would be minus 5%, right? So this negative inflation is called as deflation, right? Inflation is what? Inflation is rise in prices of commodity. Deflation is reduction in prices of commodity. Now, after 2023, the prices in 2024, it increased, but to rupees 115. So what is the inflation in 2024 with respect to 2023? It became 4.5%, right? So in earlier it was 10%. It still is increasing, but it is increasing at a lower rate of 4.5%. This highlights that inflation is there, but it has reduced. And this is called as what? This is called as disinflation. Disinflation does not mean negative inflation. Disinflation means inflation, but less inflation. Understood the difference between deflation, disinflation, and inflation? Any doubt? Please let me know quickly. Otherwise, I'll move forward. Right, so this showed that India's food inflation has actually reduced, and this is the lowest consumer price and food inflation since January 19, which is a sharp U-turn or turnaround from the persistent high food inflation India witnessed during the last financial year, right? So this is why food inflation becomes a very important topic. Now, to measure inflation in India, we rely on what? We rely on retail inflation of consumer price index. Now, automatically, people like you and I, we just don't spend our money on food. We spend our money on different things, right? We spend our money on food and beverage. We spend our money on clothing and footwear. We pay rent, we pay for houses, we pay for fuel to power our vehicles, be it two-wheeler, four-wheeler. We pay for LPG to power our kitchens. We pay on education, healthcare, transportation, etc., right? We also pay to mobile companies to recharge our mobile phones. So basically, Indian consumers like you and I, we spend our money on everything. But automatically, you can assume that we eat food at least twice a day. But do you think you recharge your phone every day? You recharge your phone maybe once a month, once in 2 months. Similarly, you pay for your education once a month, once in quarter, once in year, right? So despite the fact that we pay for different commodities, but the amount of money or the frequency of money that we pay for different commodities differs. So that is why consumer price index gives a larger share to spending on food and beverage, because we eat food at least twice a day, whereas the spending on different items varies as per their importance in the retail sector, right? So here food and beverage has the highest weightage of almost 46%. But does it mean if we calculate this section, it will give our food inflation, that is consumer food price index? That is incorrect. Therefore, we constitute a different index to measure food inflation, and this index is known as consumer food price index. Now, consumer food price index, the data is source for some sections in the consumer price index, right? So from CPI, what is included in consumer food price index becomes important, but what is not included also becomes important. So we include price rise in cereal, meat, fish, egg, milk, oats, fats, fruits, etc. and we consider this to consider food inflation, but we eliminate some of the items before we measure food inflation. These are non-alcoholic beverages, prepared meals and snacks, sweets, pan, tobacco and intoxicants. So these are not utilized to calculate consumer food price index, right? So this is why you need a different index to measure what is known as food inflation, right? And this index is called as consumer food price index, and basically this contributes to about 39% share of what is constituted as CPI, right? So I told you food and beverage has 45.86% weightage in CPI, but when you consider consumer food price index, it has lesser weightage, that is 39% of your total CPI. Well, these kind of foods or these kind of beverages are not consumed by everyone. Do you think everyone consumes pan, tobacco and intoxicants? Do you think people who have diabetes consume sweets? Do you think people living in rural area actually have a habit of bringing processed foods and eating? No, right? So to make things more visible to all, we exclude these items because these are not consumed by all. But these items more or less are consumed by major sections of population, if not all, right? Many people might not eat fish, egg, meat, but most people do, right? So therefore, we have to calculate these inflation also. Understood the logic? Any doubt? Now, let us understand the factors that have contributed in cooling down of inflation. Okay, before that, you have to understand prices of any commodity are driven by two different factors in economics. These are called as demand and these are called as supply. Now, the good thing about food is that the demand of food, at least in short term, does not change that frequently. Because if you start eating 2 rotis every day, the probability is that you will continue eating 2 rotis every day. You might reduce it by 1.5, you might reduce it by, or you might increase it by 1 more roti, but that doesn't happen quite frequently. So the demand factor about food is that it remains somewhat constant in the short term period. It might change on a longer term period, but not in short term period. Suppose if people become more health conscious and they start reducing their eating their sugar, do you think you can leave sugar tomorrow onwards? No, you gradually reduce your sugar. So if you ultimately reduce your consumption of sugar, it will reflect in longer term but not in shorter term. So the major factor that contributes to food inflation is the factor of supply. If the supply of food for some reason reduced, automatically you can understand the prices of the food items increase. Whereas if the supply of food items increase, automatically the prices fall down a lot. And this happens whenever we have a bumper harvest in India. Whenever there is a bumper harvest in India, it leads to increased supply on food items, and you understand at that time prices actually crash. Similarly, if due to weather seasons the supply of any food items is affected, you can understand the prices of that food items increase. Understood? So the only or the major factor that contributes to food inflation is changes in supply, not demand. So we'll understand how has supply been ensured in Indian economy so that it has led to cooling down of food inflation in India. And this is because of bumper agricultural harvest that we have seen in last monsoon season, because in last monsoon season India witnessed surplus rainfall more than 7.6% of its long period average. And the result of this surplus monsoon last year is that Indian farms had good soil moisture. The reservoirs which are used to provide irrigation, they had plenty of water, and even the groundwater levels, they got recharged because of surplus rainfall. And because of this factor, we witnessed not just excellent kharif production but also excellent rabi production. So this increased what? This increased the supply of food commodities in the market. Similarly, the strong monsoon is expected to continue even in 2025. The IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, it has projected that India will witness surplus rainfall even in this year. And India witnessed even an early onset of monsoon in Kerala 8 days before average. And the result of it is that more crops have been planted, and this ultimately will lead to better supply of food items in economy, right? So these are the two factors relating to monsoon that has contributed to good agricultural harvest last year, and it is expected that harvest this year in kharif season will also be good. And this has created to what? This has increased the supply of the commodity. Another factor that has played an important role is ensuring the steady supply by importing essential food commodities. Now you understand, items like oil seeds, items like pulses, these are not grown in India as per its own demand. We grow oil seeds and pulses, but not as per the demand or the domestic demand. So to fulfill the demand, we have to import these items. Now what the government has done, it has conducted record imports of pulses and vegetable oil, which have also ensured steady supply of these commodities. Similarly, to ensure that these supplies are brought into India at a cheaper rate, government has imposed zero or a very low customs duty on the essential food items. So the pulses, edible oils, their duty have been either made zero or very less, so that it reduces the overall landing prices of these commodities into India. So this have helped in cooling down of prices due to the import of essential commodities. Now, what will be the impact of cooling down of food prices on broader inflation, and how it will impact the monetary policy decisions of RBI? That is also very important. Right now, first of all, whenever there is low inflation, I've already told you CPI is at 2.1%, and RBI is responsible to maintain inflation at what? 4 plus minus 2% of CPI. So this actually makes it comfortable for RBI to bring what is known as easy money policy. Easy money policy means RBI is looking to increase the money supply in the economy, and it can increase the money supply in the economy because right now the inflation levels is quite low. And how can RBI increase money supply? By reducing the repo rate or cutting down of repo rate, right? Similarly, lower CPI may support higher real interest rates. You know what is real interest rate? Real interest rate is the difference between repo rate and the inflation rate. So lower is the inflation, the greater will be the difference between repo rate and interest rate, right? So this actually leads to improved saving in people. People looking at, because there is a high real interest rates in the economy, they will increase their deposits in the bank, and this will promote more saving among people, and this increased deposits can be utilized to give loans by the bank, right? Similarly, when people have surplus money at their own hand because of low inflation, they can spend it on different items, which will automatically boost the supply of those commodities, boost production in economy, and it will contribute to higher GDP growth, right? Similarly, cereal comfort is there. There is plenty of stocks of wheat in government reservoirs, and that is why government can offload these stocks in the open market, increasing the supply and further cooling down the prices of these commodities. Understood? Any doubts up till now? Repo rate is the rate at which RBI lends money to banks. Using repo rate, we can actually change money supply. Greater is the repo rate, lesser will be the money supply. Understood this logic? This is known as Taylor's rule in economy. Taylor, not Taylor, Darji wala Taylor nahi. Okay, Taylor, Taylor. Manoj Kumar, good morning. Any doubt? Abhi hai to pooch lo, otherwise I'll move forward. Now, there will be certain challenges that Indian economy might face due to food inflation. What will be the challenges? First is that due to many governmental policies like MSP, preferences to rice and wheat automatically is given in Indian economy. So why would farmers grow oil seeds and pulses if they are getting good MSPs for their rice and wheat? So this has contributed to decline in sowing of pulses and oil seeds, because farmers are shifting away from arhar, soybean and cotton due to non-remunerative prices, and this in future might create supply constraints, and when supply of these commodities disrupts, you understand, it will lead to increase in prices in future. Similarly, monsoon has a habit of being uncertain. It is not sufficient to say India has witnessed right now, up till now, good monsoon, but you can't say for sure monsoon will continue. Even if monsoon becomes quite disruptive or erratic, it might lead to destruction of certain of the crops. Therefore, it can use or reduce yields of the crops if the monsoon becomes uncertain. So these are the challenges that India might still face. Another challenge that the government is facing is the shortage in the availability of fertilizers, be it urea, be it diammonium phosphate, or be it complex fertilizers. The stock of these fertilizers have actually dropped in Indian economy. Now, this is majorly due to the fact that China is trying to reduce the exports of these commodities because of certain reasons, and therefore we are unable to import these items from China, and therefore it has also impacted the overall supply of these commodities. And the consequence of this reduced supply of fertilizer is the price impact, that the prices of major fertilizers have increased, and this increases the cost of agriculture, and whenever the cost of agriculture increase, it might also contribute to rise in prices of the food items in future, right? So everything you can understand by linking it to supply and demand. Understood? Any doubts up till now? Now let's see how many of you are able to solve this question. Real interest rate, right? Now the definition of real interest rate is repo rate minus inflation, right? So higher is the repo rate or lower will be the inflation, the higher will be the real interest rate. And when you get higher real interest rate, it means you can deposit more money in the bank because you will not lose out on the money. And when more deposits happen in economy, automatically the banks wouldn't keep that money in their banks. They will extend more loans in the market. And what happens when you get more loans from the market? It leads to good capital expenditure. It leads to better goods and services supply, and it leads to growth in GDP, right? Doubt? Reshma, clear hua? Let us come back to this question. Yes, increase in employment. Good, Gaurav. Now, if the inflation rises, you can understand if inflation rises, the value of real interest rate would reduce. Sorry. बताओ जल्दी जल्दी आंसर. Now, food and beverages, they have the highest weightage in CPI. This we have understood. How much is the weightage? 45.86%. The weightage of food in wholesale price index is higher than in CPI. Now, the weightage of food in wholesale price index is somewhere around 30%, but in CPI, we have already understood it's 45.86%. So, second statement also is incorrect. Now, the consumer food price index shows inflation on every food item covered by the CPI. This is incorrect. I have told you certain food items have been eliminated, like processed foods, etc. Okay, confectionery, sweets, right? So, therefore, third statement, second statement incorrect, first is right, and only one option is your right answer. Now, moving to this next article, this appeared in page 12 of today's newspaper, and it talks about the presidential reference. Why are we talking about presidential reference? Any idea? Students, any idea? Now, Supreme Court yesterday, it issued notices to union and all the state governments with respect to reference that was made to Supreme Court by the President of India using her power under Article 143. And this will be heard by a constitutional bench which will consist of 5 judges, and this is expected to be heard somewhere around mid-August. So this is the news development we are going to talk about. Now let me give you certain background about this issue. Now last month, in the month of June, President Draupadi Murmu, she posed 14 different questions to Supreme Court based on the Supreme Court's verdict that it gave on April the 8th. Now on April the 8th verdict of Supreme Court, it fixed timelines for governor and the president when a bill is presented to them after being passed by the state legislature. Now because of this, the Supreme Court has been given a question using the power given to President under Article 143, and here President of India, Madam Draupadi Murmu, she wants to ask whether such timelines can be imposed on governor and the president, especially at the time when such timelines are not being mentioned anywhere in the constitution, right? So this is what the President of India is going to ask. How many of you have liked this video? Go like video quickly. 2 questions, nahi, 14 questions. I told you, right? She has asked 14 questions to the President of India. We are going to cover each and every question in great detail. No need to worry. Now let me give you a brief background of what happened in the April when the Supreme Court gave a judgment, and this judgment is particularly relating with the governor of Tamil Nadu and a case or conflict that it rose with the state of Tamil Nadu, right? Now here in this judgment, the Supreme Court declared that the action of Tamil Nadu governor Mr. R.N. Ravi, when he reserved 10 bills that were already passed by the state legislature for the consideration of president, and Supreme Court said that this act of the governor of Tamil Nadu is an illegal and an erroneous act. And in this process, the Supreme Court actually fixed timelines on the governor's decision. Supreme Court stated that governor, when presented a bill passed by the state legislature, he has to give the assent within 3 months at the first time when this bill is sent. Now you understand, governor also has the power to send this big bill back to the state legislature for its reconsideration. So when the state legislature again passes the bill, then governor only has 1 month to decide on his assent. Similarly, when this bill is reserved by governor for the consideration of president, president is also bound by a strict timeline of 3 months, right? So therefore, Supreme Court in this judgment imposed certain timeline on both governor and president when they have to give assent to a bill passed by state legislature. Now, what is certain controversy regarding it? Now you have to understand, governors are appointed by the state government. So in most cases, governors of a state, they conduct their policy based on the interest of central government, right? So it has been automatically understood that you need to put certain restrictions on use of discretion by the governor. So this is understood. This is not problematic. What is problematic, that Supreme Court has not just restricted or imposed timelines on the governor, but it has also done on the head of state of Indian government, that is the president, because president under Article 201 has a constitutional discretion which in using which he or she can actually not sign the particular bill of state legislature. But this Supreme Court has imposed a certain timeline even on the discretion or the exercise of power under Article 201 by the President of India. So this has actually invited that whether or not Supreme Court is overreaching on its power by imposing deadlines on the executive that is represented by the President. So in this regard, Madam President of India, Srimati Draupadi Murmu, she actually imposed certain questions on the Supreme Court using her power under Article 143. So what is Article 143? Let us understand this. This is also called as Supreme Court's advisory jurisdiction. Now this Article 143 subsection 1 states that President of India can use this power at any time when it appears to the President that there is a question of law or fact that has arisen in public interest and therefore it needs to be addressed. So in that regard, the President of India can actually ask for legal opinion of the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court, not just the Chief Justice will consider this, but it will be considered by a full court, and according to this, a report will be given back to the President of what is the legal opinion of the Supreme Court. So this is done under Article 143(1) of the Constitution, right? Now, what you need to understand, Yashi, if it is already done, that doesn't mean that it won't come in the exam. Is there any harm in revising of important topics? This is once in a blue moon topic. It does not happen every year. So when this is there in the discussion, you can automatically assume the likelihood of this question appearing in next year's exam is very high. Now, the advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, it allows the President to seek independent advice on certain constitutional matters. Now, you have to understand this is not the decision of President. President is imposing these questions on the Supreme Court because it has been the advice given to her by the cabinet. So this is basically the power of Union Cabinet, that it can ask a legal opinion of the Supreme Court through the President of India. And this power of the President, this has not been invoked for the first time. In total, in India's independent history, there have been 5 or 15 instances where such questions have been posed to Supreme Court. And in Article 145(3), it states that when such questions are being posed with Supreme Court, it will be heard by at least 5 number of judges, and after considering these questions, the Supreme Court can send a report to the President based on the majority opinion of these 5 judges, right? So this is how this Article 145 is exercised by the Supreme Court. Now, is it mandatory for Supreme Court to answer whatever questions has been posed by the President? The answer is no, because if you read Article 143, it states that the court may, after such hearing, if it thinks fit, it can report to the President of its opinion. So if the word may is highlighted here, it indicates that it is the discretion of the Supreme Court. It may or it may not send this advice to the President. So it is not mandatory, but rather a discretionary power of the Supreme Court whether it wants to give this advice to the President of India. And historically, Supreme Court has at least in 2 times not given a legal opinion to the President. One very notable instance, it was in 1993 when then President Shankar Dayal Sharma asked the Supreme Court whether a Hindu temple or any Hindu religious structure existed prior to the construction of Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid in the area where the Babri Masjid structure stood. And when this question was asked to the Supreme Court unanimously refused to answer this suit because the matter was already pending with different courts in the country. And 2 judges, they said that this reference that was used by the President to hear this sensitive matter, it actually was unconstitutional because it went against the ideas or principles of secularism, right? So you need to understand this is not a mandatory question. Supreme Court can actually refuse to give the legal opinions also. Now, can Supreme Court overturn the decision that it made in the April judgment when it imposed timelines on the President as well as Governor? Now, you have to understand Article 143 is not a mechanism where executive can ask for review of Supreme Court decision, because Supreme Court has many times highlighted that there are 2 types of jurisdiction that Supreme Court has. First, is a jurisdiction to give judgments. This is called as adjudicatory decision. Now, whenever Supreme Court uses this power, that is adjudicatory decision, it means that whatever Supreme Court says has a force of law and it is binding on all the parties. But another power that Supreme Court has is an advisory jurisdiction, which means Supreme Court is just providing a legal opinion which is not binding on the people, and it is not a way to solve a dispute. If there is a dispute, you can use the adjudicatory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, not the advisory jurisdiction. So Article 143 is what? It is use of Supreme Court's advisory jurisdiction. So whatever Supreme Court will say will not have a binding impact on the government. No. What if President asks again for the refusal? After refusal of SC, Supreme Court can again deny, because it is not a compulsion on Supreme Court. It is just an exercise of advisory jurisdiction. Understand? So if you take your dispute to Supreme Court will solve it, because it is the responsibility of Supreme Court to do so. But if you ask a legal opinion from the Supreme Court, it may give that opinion or it may not give that opinion. Understood the difference? Baga, sir, but what's the point if they choose not to give advice or to give opinions when they ask? Well, this is a legal matter, na? Whenever any dispute may arise in the future, automatically it will be referred to Supreme Court. So, government is asking, what is your legal opinion on these items? Then government will understand what is the Supreme Court's legal opinion. Understand? Now, whenever you go to an expert, and if you have a doctor friend, na, you ask ki, यार ये खाना चाहिए कि नहीं खाना चाहिए, doctors or your friend will say नहीं खाना चाहिए because not good, but that doesn't mean he'll follow his decision. Now, is this presidential reference only related to April 8th ruling? The answer is both yes and no. First of all, in her letter, the president, she asked many questions to the Supreme Court. She said, first of all, that Article 200 and 201 that deals with the assent given by governor and president to the state legislature bill. The Madam President highlighted that the constitution under these articles do not put a specific time frame to give the decisions by the governor and president. So she is asked a question, how can Supreme Court ask or give a certain timeline when the constitution does not say anything about it? Another fact that the Supreme Court did, that it automatically gave the assent even without the consent of the governor, using its power under Article 142, that is the deemed assent. So the Madam President is asking a question to the Supreme Court that this is something not alien, or this is something not present in the Indian constitutional scheme. How can Supreme Court give a decision which was meant for executive, that is governor? So this is also a question that has been asked by the Madam President, whether or not Supreme Court can use its extraordinary power to give a decision which was originally meant for the governor. Also, in the question 12th, what Madam President asked was that Supreme Court, whenever there is a case or an important case with Supreme Court should first determine that whether this question or this case deals with substantive question of the law or it requires interpretation of the constitution. So if Supreme Court actually says that any case in front of it is dealing with these two matters, then a larger bench should hear this matter. And the bench that gave its April ruling only constituted of 2 judges. So Madam President says that when a certain matter that deals with interpretation of the constitution or substantive question of the law, why didn't a larger bench deal with that matter, and why did a smaller bench of only 2 judges can hear this matter? So the question that was asked by President is whether a smaller bench can hear such important matters. Now, is the presidential reference only about April 8 ruling? Here also 13th question, the President asked that the questions about the use of Article 142 power. We have already understood that Article 142 provides a very large amount of power to Supreme Court, that it can decide on anything. So the Supreme Court said, or sorry, the Madam President asked the Supreme Court whether using Article 142 can Supreme Court deal with only procedural matters, or it can pass certain direction which is even not present in the constitution, like it did by giving deemed assent, right? So this is again a question that has been imposed by President, and let us see what the Supreme Court says about these questions. Another question that was asked by Madam President was that whether Supreme Court can define the contours of center and state dispute. Now, whenever there is a dispute between center and state government, it is dealt by Supreme Court using its power under Article 131. That is the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court. But here Supreme Court has said if the governor or president does not adhere to this timeline, people can actually approach Supreme Court under Article 32, which is the article for constitutional remedies. So, Madam President has asked the Supreme Court, when you only had the power under Article 131, how can you use Article 32 to decide on matters that is between a center and a state government, right? So, these are the questions that have been imposed in front of the Supreme Court by Madam President using her powers. Using which article? Using Article 143. Now, what is the broader context behind this presidential reference? This issue pertained to Tamil Nadu governor because he did not accept or give assent to the bills passed by the state government. And governors, as they are appointed by the central government, they have obviously in many instances seen to be undercutting the powers of an elected government, which is detrimental to India's federal structure. While Supreme Court has addressed this issue in April 8 judgment, but it also extended its scrutiny to the powers of president as well. And therefore, this matter has become quite controversial. Now, the government used this ruling to say that the judiciary was undermining the parliament. The Attorney General of India, he made a statement that first of all, you did not hear the arguments given by the president. So how can you pass the judgment without even allowing the president to put her case in the court? Similarly, the former vice president now, Mr. Jagdeep Dhankad, he criticized the ruling saying that parliamentary supremacy is there in India, and when judiciary is using such powers, it is using its judicial review power to undermine what is the original decision passed by the parliament and there in the constitution. So this, according to the former vice president, violates the separation of powers in India. Chirag, bit ironic for governors to cry crow over each when they themselves are interfering in matters of elected representatives. Good, Chirag, good. Now let's see how many of you are answering this question. There was a question in 2019 regarding Article 142. So I have changed that question to suit our today's discussion. Which of the following is correct about Article 143? Well, the president can refer any political disagreement within parliament for the Supreme Court for binding resolution. Incorrect. When it is a political disagreement, they are to solve it within themselves, especially when it is in parliament. The Supreme Court is obligated to give answer to every question referred to it by president under Article 143. I have told you they are not obligated. President can seek Supreme Court's advisory opinion even on matters pending before any high court. Incorrect. The opinion given by the Supreme Court under Article 143 is not binding on the president. Correct. This is the use of Supreme Court's advisory jurisdiction. Had it been adjudicated jurisdiction, then it would have been binding on the president. We understand last option is correct, so option D is your right answer. Now, how many of you are preparing for IB? Have you taken admission anywhere? Are you considering giving IB exam? Are you even considering giving exam? That I am asking you guys. All of you. Why no, Amar? How old are you? Chirag, how do you plan to give this exam? Shushmita? Amar, never. Why never? Amar, when you are only 23, you have the opportunity to serve our country. How many at the young age of 23 get real opportunity? This is, believe me, this is one of the opportunity that people would like. You want to work in ME only. Okay. That I get. So, do you think you're preparing hard enough to clear this exam and get a very good rank to get yourself an Indian Forest Service seat? Well, if you are planning to give IB exam, you should seriously consider it. And if you want to get guidance, this is a very good course that we have launched. Here, if you use the code ATS Live now, that is flashing on the bottom half of your screen, you will get 2000 rupees off on the courses, right? And this will provide you a discount of rupees 2000 on the course, and effectively you'll have to pay 2999 only, right? So please ensure. Please, first of all, please try to give the exam, and if you want guidance, this will be the guidance. Okay, Saurabh Tiwari was still in graduation yesterday. Yes, you have to be a graduate. Now, this is another article. China breaks ground on a $170 billion dam near Arunachal. And this automatically is a cause of concern for India. So, why is it a cause of concern? Let us understand this. Now, you understand Brahmaputra river originates in China in Tibet. And when it flows into China, before entering into India, it makes a U-turn. And very near to this U-turn, let me change the pen color here first. Before this U-turn, the China is constructing a hydropower project in this area, right? So in this area, before entering into India, if China is constructing a very massive hydropower project, automatically it will change the flow of Brahmaputra river, and hence it is an effect on India. So how does it impact India? Let us find out in our today's discussion. Right now, China has officially announced the start of the construction of its massive hydropower project, which is the world's largest hydropower project on the Yarlung Tsangpo river, and this is the name of Brahmaputra river when it travels in China. Right now, this automatically is a very crucial moment for India's strategic interests. So we'll understand how this impacts India. Right? Yes, correct, Bandna Joel at Namcha Barwa. Now, across the border from China, when you enter into India and Arunachal Pradesh, this project obviously has raised alarm because of the potential downstream impact. And particularly the affected region would be the Siang region, which is inhabited by a very important tribe known as Adi tribe. Automatically this region is vulnerable, and when there will be a massive hydropower project, it might lead to submergence or change in the ecology of the region. So people naturally are afraid. And to counter this Chinese dam, Indian government has also planned its own hydropower project. So everything we are going to cover. No need to worry. Now let us first cover few details about the Brahmaputra river. Brahmaputra river originates in Chamyongdong Glacier in Tibet, in the Kailash range, exactly the where we conduct our annual pilgrimage. Now in China, this river is called as Yarlung Tsangpo. Now when it emerges into China, it emerges into a very turbulent and a dynamic river, which is very powerful enough to carve out a deep gorge in central Himalayan region near Namcha Barwa. Now it enters into India in the Geling region of Arunachal Pradesh, and when it enters into India, it is called as Siang river. And when it enters into India, it receives different tributaries like Dibang and Lohit. So Siang combines with Dibang and Lohit, and then it becomes which river? It becomes Brahmaputra river. Now this Brahmaputra river, after flowing through Arunachal Pradesh, it enters into Assam, where it travels for 750 kilometers, eventually then entering into Bangladesh and moving southwards, right? Now it travels for 750 kilometers in Arunachal Pradesh, in Assam, where it meets different tributaries like Budhi Diang, Dhansari, which are the left bank tributaries of Brahmaputra, as well as Subansiri, Kameng, Manas and Sankoch, which are the right bank tributaries of Brahmaputra. Then it enters into Bangladesh, where it is joined with another river known as Teesta. And then this river, or that is the combination of Brahmaputra and Teesta, is called as Jamuna with the J. And then it finally merges with the river Padma before draining into the Bay of Bengal. Now, what you have to understand that the Brahmaputra river is characterized with its very vigorous river flow. Therefore, it can cause floods, which is very prominent in the regions of Assam during the months of monsoon. It leads to channel shifting, and even because of the high flow, it leads to erosion of the bank. Now, the qualities of the Brahmaputra river that you have to understand, that most of the tributaries which are providing waters to the Brahmaputra, they themselves are a very large river themselves, and therefore they just do not bring large quantities of water, but they also bring a large quantities of sediments, right? Now, what happens is that many projects are being planned by China on the rivers Brahmaputra. Some are very small run-of-the-river projects, and these are intended to construct or generate hydropower electricity. But as these are not large storage dams and they are constructed very far upstream in the Chinese region away from Arunachal Pradesh border, so some projects that have been constructed by China are not a big cause of concern for India. But what is a big cause of concern for India is the Medog hydropower project, which is the world's largest hydropower project aiming to generate 60,000 megawatt of electricity. Now, this has been planned near the Great Bend region of river where it makes a U-turn before entering into India. And although the Chinese have claimed these have limited water storage capacity, but with China we can't trust. So therefore, this hydropower project will have a large scale impact on the region's ecology, as well as it also creates certain strategic concerns for India. What are these concerns? We'll understand this. Right, what you need to understand that the flow of waters in Brahmaputra, the majority of the waters in Brahmaputra is supplied by Indian tributaries, and this is because of two different factors. First is that Indian regions where the Brahmaputra river flows witnesses large amount of rainfall, and I've already told you the tributaries of Brahmaputra river, they supply a large amount of water themselves. So because of these two factors, the majority of water, that is more than 80% of the waters in Brahmaputra, are coming from Indian side, despite the fact that India's area of Brahmaputra only constitutes about 34% of the total basin area of Brahmaputra, right? First of all, Tibetan region is a very minor contributor, although it witnesses rainfall, but in comparison to India, it witnesses almost 8 times less amount of rainfall. So whenever the rainfall factor or the pouring of water happens, automatically the larger portion of water to Brahmaputra is contributed by which side? By Indian side. Similarly, as I have already told you, the tributaries of Brahmaputra river, these are large rivers themselves, and therefore due to significant monsoon, they contribute large amount of water, and not just monsoon supplies water to it. Even the snow melt which happens from upper reaches of Himalaya, the melted water also reaches this river, contributing to huge flow of Brahmaputra river. Now, based on this factor, many scientists have concluded that this Chinese project will not have a significant overall impact. But when it comes to regional or seasonal impact, there will be seasonal and regional impact. How it will impact the region? Let us understand this. First of all, to generate hydropower electricity, you have to understand the water flow needs to be constant. So during the rainfall deficit season, during the summer season, when the flow of water in Brahmaputra is less, China using its dam can actually stop the river water, or it can even reduce the flow of water through the dams, right? So what will happen that the Chinese projects here, it might stop the river flow into the hydropower projects that are constructed on the Indian side, and it will impact the hydropower generational potential of India's hydropower project. So this is the first challenge. Another challenge is the ecological challenge. Now, as I've already told you, if the Chinese control the flow of water, it might lead to scarce amount of water flowing into the Indian side, and it may impact the river's overall morphology and also the aquatic ecosystems. But during the monsoon season, whenever the flow of river water is beyond the Chinese control also, it may pose a risk of flooding on the Indian side. It might be intentional from the Chinese side if they decide to open the gates of the dam, or it might be even unintentional, because if the flow of water increases beyond a certain level, the dam operators do not have any other option but to open the dam gates, right? So due to intentional or unintentional reasons, there might be risk of flooding in Indian side. Similarly, you do not know about unforeseen events. Whenever we have heard there is a large hydropower project being constructed, it increases the probability of earthquakes and landslides happening in the future. So this might also be the reason which can pose risk on the Indian side, right? So both less flow of water in Brahmaputra and more flow of water, if it is altered by the hydropower project on the Chinese side, it will impact India, right? So this is the problem that we'll have to deal with. Now, Brahmaputra is very important as far as India is concerned. It contributes to about 30% of India's total water resource potential. And in terms of hydropower potential, Brahmaputra, just one river system itself, contributes 41% of total India's hydropower potential. So it is very essential for India. Using its hydropower projects in the Arunachal Pradesh region, you have to generate electricity. But these hydropower projects are facing certain difficulties, obviously, because if you construct these hydropower projects on the Indian side, it will lead to displacement of large amount of local people, particularly the Adi tribe. Also, making the hydropower project requires you to procure large amount of lands, and you understand land acquisition is a big problem in India. Similarly, it might also lead to submergence of forest areas in Arunachal, which is again detrimental to the ecology of the region, right? So these are the overall problems. Now the next question is, what can India do to negate or to reduce the risk that is posed with India? First of all, India can plan its own storage and hydropower projects on the Indian side in Arunachal Pradesh, and for that the government is coming up with a Siang Upper Multipurpose Project, which is a hydropower project aiming to generate 11,000 megawatt of electricity, and it will not just generate power in Arunachal Pradesh, but it will also act as a buffer against the varying flow of river water from the Chinese side. Similarly, the National Water Development Authority is also planning to make a link between Brahmaputra river systems and river systems in the Indian mainland. Therefore, when you connect Brahmaputra with Ganga basin, you can actually transfer the surplus water from Brahmaputra to the water scarce region in the northern parts of the country. This is through these links that the government has already planned. Another aspect is using its diplomatic powers. First of all, you can conduct a detailed multidisciplinary study which will help you assess the risk properly, and you can make the adaptive strategies accordingly. Similarly, you can use the diplomacy to seek detailed hydrological and project related data from the Chinese side, because when you know what the Chinese are doing, then only you'll make your own decisions, right? Also, we need to work with the Chinese government to develop a comprehensive data sharing protocol so that in case of a future risk, the Chinese alert us and we are prepared accordingly, right? So we can use every methods at our own disposal. We can create our own hydropower projects, but also diplomacy can play a very important role here, right? Now, this is a PYQ of 2016. Let's see how many of you are able to solve this question. How many of you are from Northeast? Please let me know in the comments what do you think about this issue. All these three are right answer. King Tagi from Arunachal, what do you feel about this project? Are you aware of this project before our today's discussion? Well, all these three are correct. Option D is the right answer. So what is your opinion, King Tagi? Will we able to counter the threat from Chinese side? I like your name. It has king in it. Now it is almost 12. So we'll conclude our today's discussion. The last article about Nisar will cover it tomorrow. Okay. You can download the notes on this Telegram channel, ATS Live. So we'll see each other again tomorrow. Please have a very good day.